There is a moment, usually late at night, when the numbers stop being abstract. You are 55 years old. You are sitting at a kitchen table. Maybe there's a cup of coffee going cold next to you, and you are doing the math. Not the someday math, not the hopeful, rough estimate you've been telling yourself for years. The real math. How much is actually in the account? How many years you realistically have left to live? How much you will need every single month just to survive? And somewhere in that calculation, something shifts in your chest because the numbers do not add up the way you thought they would. And unlike when you were 30 or 40, you can't just tell yourself you'll figure it out later. Later is now. Time is not on your side anymore. And that feeling, that cold, quiet dread, that is what I want to talk about today. Because I've been there, and I found something that changed everything. My name is John, and what I'm about to show you has the power to completely transform the way you think about retirement. Most people will never hear this. Stay with me. Here is what almost every person believes about retirement. You work hard for 40 years, you save whatever you can, you retire with a number in your account, and then you slowly, carefully spend that number down. You ration it, you stretch it, you pray it lasts longer than you do. You try to die with zero, or close to it. Use it all up. That's the plan. That is what financial advisors, retirement calculators, and every magazine article has been telling you your entire adult life. But here's the truth that changes everything. The people who actually thrive in retirement, the ones who die with more money than they retired with, do not spend their portfolios down. They grow them. And the difference between someone who retires with $500,000 and ends up broke versus someone who retires with that same $500,000 and ends up with over $2 million is not luck. It's not market timing. It's not inheritance. It's a completely different way of thinking about money that almost nobody ever teaches you. Think about what that really means. Most retirees spend their golden years in a quiet kind of fear. Every time they check their balance and see it dropping, their stomach tightens. They start cutting back on things they earned the right to enjoy. They hesitate before every purchase. They feel guilty for spending money on themselves. They're in survival mode from the very first day of retirement. That's not living. That's just a slower kind of suffering. But there's a small group of retirees who are asking a completely different question. Not how do I make this last, but how do I structure this so it keeps growing even while I'm using it? Same amount of money, same starting point, completely different ending. Here is where the invisible line is drawn between those two groups. It's not how much money they have, it's whether they understand something called the withdrawal sequence. Most people believe retirement is simple. Save money, retire, pull out 4% a year, hope for the best. But that 4% rule is built on one huge assumption, that your only goal is to not run out of money. It's a defensive strategy. It's playing not to lose. But what if you played to win instead? What if the goal was not just preservation, but multiplication? Here's what that looks like with real numbers. You have $500,000 at 65. You withdraw 4%, which is $20,000 a year. Combined with Social Security, maybe you're bringing in $45,000 total. You live on that. The portfolio stays roughly flat if the market cooperates. And over 30 years, you gradually chip away at it until there's almost nothing left. That's the plan most people follow, and it barely works when everything goes right. But what happens when something goes wrong? A health scare, a market crash, an emergency you didn't plan for. Suddenly, barely working becomes not working at all. Now here's the version that changes your life. That same $500,000 structured differently can become over $2 million by the time you're 90. Same person, same starting amount, completely different result. How? Because wealthy retirees don't just withdraw, they allocate. You take that $500,000 and you divide it into 3 separate buckets. The first bucket holds $100,000 in cash and short-term bonds. This is your spending money for the next 5 years, $20,000 a year. You don't touch the stock market for living expenses. You live off this safe bucket and you sleep at night because you know exactly where next month's money is coming from. The second bucket holds $150,000 in dividend-paying stocks and real estate investment trusts. This bucket generates income of around 4 to 5% annually, roughly $7,000 a year. That money gets reinvested or it supplements the first bucket when you need it. It's quiet money, working in the background. The third bucket holds $250,000 in growth stocks and index funds. This is money you don't touch for at least 10 years. You don't look at it when the market drops. You don't panic when the headlines are bad. You just let it compound. You let time do the heavy lifting. Now watch what happens. While you're living off bucket 1 for 5 years, bucket 3 is growing. At an average return of 8%, that $250,000 becomes $368,000 in 5 years. Your dividend bucket is generating income and slowly increasing. And when bucket 1 runs out after 5 years, you don't panic. You simply refill it by selling a portion of bucket 3, which has now grown significantly. You put another $100,000 into bucket 1, and you still have more money left in bucket 3 than you started with. That's the secret hiding in plain sight. You're spending, but you're growing faster than you're spending. And the longer this continues, the bigger the gap becomes between you and everyone else who followed the standard plan. Let the projection land for a moment. At year 5, you've spent $100,000, but your total portfolio is around $570,000 because buckets 2 and 3 kept growing while you lived off bucket 1. At year 10, you've spent $200,000 total, but your portfolio is sitting at $680,000. At year 15, you've spent $300,000 and you're holding $820,000. At year 20, you've spent nearly as much as you started with, and your portfolio is worth over $1 million. You spent almost everything you started with and still doubled your money. That's not luck, that's structure. But here's the part that's harder to explain, and yet might be the most important piece of all. For this to work, something has to change inside you. You have to stop thinking like someone who's running out of time and start thinking like someone who's running a system. And that's genuinely difficult for most people because retirement feels like an ending. You stop working, you stop earning. Every dollar that leaves the account feels like one less dollar between you and disaster. Retirees who understand the bucket approach aren't staring at their total balance every morning. They know bucket 1 is supposed to go down. That's its entire purpose. What they're watching is bucket 3 grow, and as long as bucket 3 is compounding faster than bucket 1 is depleting, they're not losing, they're winning. That mental shift from hoarding out of fear to deploying with confidence is worth more than any specific investment strategy. Wealthy retirees also stop thinking of themselves as people who are done and start thinking of themselves as portfolio managers. They don't retire from making decisions, they retire from jobs they didn't want. They stay engaged with their money. They rebalance when needed. They adjust their withdrawal rate when the market dips. They look for opportunities when others are running scared. They're active stewards of a living system, not passive victims of a shrinking pile. You are 65 with $500,000. A conventional advisor will probably tell you to go 60% bonds, 40% stocks. Safe, conservative, stable. But here is the brutal truth about that advice. Bonds do not grow, they preserve. And if you are going to live another 30 years, preservation is not enough. Inflation alone will erode the value of a bond-heavy portfolio until it can no longer support your lifestyle. You need growth. So instead of following conventional wisdom, you keep 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds and cash. Yes, it feels riskier, but over 30 years, it's actually the safer choice because it can outpace both inflation and withdrawals at the same time. And when the market inevitably crashes, which it will, you are not exposed. Say it drops in year 2 and your portfolio falls from $500,000 to $400,000. Every retiree who followed the standard plan is now in a full panic. They're selling, they're locking in losses, they're watching years of savings evaporate. But you are still living off bucket 1. Bucket 1 is in cash. It did not crash. Bucket 3 took the hit, but you are not touching bucket 3 for another 8 years. So you wait, you let it recover. You stay calm because your structure allows you to stay calm. Same crash, completely different experience. And here's where it gets even more powerful. When the market drops and everyone around you is terrified, you actually have an opportunity. You have cash in bucket one. You are not forced to sell anything. So you can take some of that cash and move it into bucket three while everything is on sale. You are buying low while your neighbors are panic selling. The same event that devastates one retiree builds wealth for another. That difference, multiplied over decades, is where the gap between $500,000 and $2 million actually comes from. Now, here's a decision that most retirees get completely wrong, and it costs them more than almost anything else: housing. By the time you are 65, your house is likely paid off, and the story you've been told is to stay in it. It's familiar, it's paid for, it's yours. But here's what nobody actually calculates. That paid-off house is still costing you $15,000 to $20,000 a year in property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and utilities. And it's locking up $300,000 to $500,000 in equity that's sitting completely still, not growing, not generating income, just sitting there. Compare that to selling the house, downsizing, and investing the difference. Suddenly, you have an extra $300,000 in your portfolio. At 8% growth, that's $24,000 a year in gains, more than enough to cover a smaller place and still grow your net worth. You go from paying to maintain a large asset to having your money actively work for you. Same person, different choice, completely different trajectory. There's also something that happens to your sense of personal power when your portfolio is growing instead of shrinking. You stop accepting whatever comes your way. If you want to work part-time for enjoyment or purpose, you can be selective. You take the projects you want. You walk away from the ones you do not. You negotiate from a place of confidence rather than desperation. You are not a retiree hoping to stretch a fixed amount as long as possible. You are someone managing growing wealth who simply doesn't have a 9-to-5 anymore. That posture, that inner confidence changes how you move through the world every single day. Now, here's the warning that you absolutely need to hear. The first 5 years of retirement are the most dangerous, not because of the market, because of you. You finally have time. You finally have access to your savings. And after decades of discipline, the temptation to celebrate is overwhelming. Expensive trips, a new vehicle, helping a son or a brother or a friend with a down payment, and before you know it, you've pulled out $150,000 in the first 3 years instead of the planned $60,000. And now your portfolio doesn't have enough mass to compound effectively. You have sabotaged the entire system before it had a chance to work. The people who turn $500,000 into $2 million don't treat retirement as permission to spend recklessly. They treat year 1 of retirement with the same strategic discipline they applied during year 39 of working. They stick to the plan. They protect the buckets. They don't raid bucket 3 for something that feels urgent but isn't actually necessary. Here's the thing about opportunity cost that never gets explained properly. Every dollar you spend in year 1 is not just that dollar. It's everything that dollar would have become over the next 25 years. An extra $50,000 spent on luxuries in your first year of retirement is not a $50,000 decision. At 8% over 25 years, that's a $340,000 decision. One impulsive choice just eliminated $350,000 from your future. Enjoy retirement. Spend on things that truly matter to you, but understand what you are actually trading. Make the choice with open eyes, not in a moment of excitement. So here's what all of this comes down to. Retirement is not a finish line. It's not the moment you stop thinking about money. It's the beginning of the most financially important chapter of your life. The difference between struggling through retirement and genuinely thriving through it is not how much you saved, it's how you structured what you saved. It's whether you built a machine or dug a hole. The retirees who grow their wealth are not the luckiest ones. They are the most structured ones. They separate spending from growth. They stay invested longer than fear tells them to. They keep their heads when the market drops. They make bold, strategic decisions about housing and lifestyle instead of just clipping coupons and hoping for the best. And they treat their portfolio as something alive, something that needs attention and intention, not something they passively watch disappear. Whether you're 20 years from retirement or 2 years away or already retired right now, you can restructure around this. You can build the buckets. You can shift toward growth. You can stop playing defense and start playing to win. It's not complicated. It just requires a different framework than the one most people were handed. And 25 years from now, when you're 90 and your portfolio is worth more than it was when you stopped working, when you've spent decades of comfortable, confident, fearless living, when you realize you're going to leave behind more than you ever thought possible, you'll remember this moment, the moment the whole thing clicked, the moment you stopped thinking about how to survive retirement and started thinking about how to build inside it. My name is John.